Oh, yeah. Yo, let's do this. Now, place your homie roll.
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to the X Cultural Show, powered by Vistatec. I am Michael Asquith, your host. Vistatec is a global content solutions partner focused on creating compelling outcomes to some of the most iconic and innovative global brands in the world. At Vistatec, we help build an adaptive, custom enterprise-level global content communication and localization programs to support and enhance the international user customer experience at scale, enabling revenue opportunities for global customer or global commercial success. During this X Cultural live webcast and recorded podcast, I will be tackling today the incredible, fast-moving, sustainable culture changing and influencing global business and global brands of today with my very special guest, Jeanne Riot, or Riot, PhD at Accenture. Jeanne is uniquely gifted and ridiculously well-versed in these subjects, especially as it relates to the procurement outsourcing space, where she has been working for Accenture, an Irish multinational who, like Vistatec, is headquartered in Dublin. Accenture is a Fortune 500 a company providing consulting and processing services, if you don't know already. And Jeanne is based in London and currently works as supplier inclusion and sustainability lead. It is with great pleasure to introduce one of the more unassuming individuals that I've been fortunate enough to meet and have on this show. Welcome, Jeanne. Are you there?
Hey, yes, I am.
Hello, Jeanne. Great to have you. So I thought we'd first, I always like to, have the audience hear what I call the pop song version of where you are professionally, who you are, a little bit about your specific role at Accenture London as in this role as supplier inclusion and sustainability lead. So I will let you speak, but it would be lovely to hear more about you and that role.
Right, thank you. So, hello everyone. So I'm going to take you literally and answer quite literally your question. When you talk about pop songs, I may be aging myself a bit, but well, I'd say there's a bit of jump around from the House of Pain because you have to seek your opportunities. And I started in France after my PhD in sustainability. And I didn't find what I wanted in France, so I came to the UK. At the time, it was really easy. You would just, take a backpack, take the train, and move in London. It was meant to be just for a year, and I think it's 6 years in now, and I'm still in London. And so I looked for different jobs. Was an emissions analyst, worked at then as an energy manager for big industrial portfolios. And this company was acquired by Accenture. So after I moved a little bit within Accenture, became a project management for outsourcing operations. And finally, a year ago, I got my dream job, which matched, my education background and then the project management experience. And I'm now, a supplier inclusion and sustainability lead for Accenture. So that's great. I would say a bit of Drake too. Started at the bottom, now we're here.
Yeah, right on.
And hopefully, continue to rise.
No, that's fantastic, and I always think it's awesome when you're finally kind of doing what your education was for. So I think that's fantastic, and no, thank you so much for being here. So let's I want to dive right into sustainability culture, but before we do, I just want to let the live audience know that please feel free to post any questions in the Zoom chat, or feel free to put them up on the LinkedIn events page where they will be addressed in due time. We appreciate it, but we want to pack as much as we can in less than an hour here. So before we get further into the weeds, as a person kind of listening to the expert, I think it's important first to kind of put things into perspective as far as where I come from in all of this with sustainability. I thought, it's just to kind of show where my personal interest is, and that goes beyond its buzz. So when it comes to the environment, I like to think of myself a little bit like a casual conservationist. as I love nature and wildlife, and I've been more and more passionate about educating myself to avoid the ignorance and contribute, hopefully, in a way that helps protect good old Mother Earth. So I consciously try not to take this planet for granted and do my part as a human and as a citizen of the world, the US, and Chicago, where I'm actually broadcasting from now. And for many people, caring about recycling or understanding sustainability as a multifaceted concept, or speaking about the importance of circular economy, it used to be that there was this whole concept of tree hugger if you're really into sustainability. And so I think that that's an interesting kind of visual and kind of thing to think about, because I know in the 70s and the 80s it definitely was like that. When I was a kid, we used to kind of say granola head, which I don't know if you've heard that one, Jeanne, but I thought that one was pretty funny. But I thought it was important to kind of at least say where I'm at in all of this. So part of sustainability culture may come with some judgment on both sides of the aisle, as you as an individual begin to learn and embrace the truth about the negative impact burning fossil fuels and cutting down forests and farming livestock has had on greenhouse gases contributing to global warming. So my first question to you, Jeanne, is when it comes to your lens about sustainability culture on a surface level amongst individuals and some of their predispositions, what is trendy versus hypocritical versus the extremely hardcore out there? And if it makes it easier, maybe a little bit of what you see out there working with different organizations, as a part of Accenture. So I know that's a lot of kind of questions all wrapped up in one.
Yeah, it's a big question. First, I'd like to mention let's tackle the individual first. What I really like is actually when we started talking about this podcast or this webcast, and you mentioned sustainability culture, I was a bit like, oh, like there is actually a sustainability culture, and I really like that term, because it really means that we're getting our own culture, we're going mainstream. And as you mentioned, in the 70s, it was like tree huggers, hippies. It was a bit derogatory, but now everyone is doing it. And I really like the fact that every individual can do it at their own pace, depending on what they say. So you mentioned you're more a conservationist. There's different approaches to that. Like in the city, you hear a bit about people becoming more and more vegan. I do have a joke about that, actually. How do you know someone is a vegan, Michael?
I don't know. How do you know someone's a vegan?
They will let you know. Don't worry about it.
Nice.
So it's people make a lot of fun.
Is that the activists in them? Is that the radicalism in them?
So there's a lot of fun made about vegans on internet, because they become quite a meme a bit. But they actually write at the individual level. One of the ways you can really reduce your environmental footprint is by becoming a vegan and reducing your meat consumption. Because like dairy industry, cropping to feed the cows, etc. It all has a hidden toll on the environment. So actually becoming a vegan, or just reducing as much as possible your meat consumption, is actually important. But at individual level, not everyone can do this all the time. So there's you'll follow lots of trends around people trying to be zero waste, zero plastic, and focusing really on reducing the amount of waste they produce by cooking more at home, etc. And there's all this culture about, maybe it's called slow sustainability, but I think makes it more approachable for everyone, because it's not just about the scientists and the big corporations. Although, as we'll see, like they're the ones who can really change. Like at individual level, will only go to a certain point. Big corporations that are now making commitments are really like pushing this forward.
No, and I think that really breaks it down. And I think sometimes I kind of think a little bit about like the fact that I feel guilty still sometimes drinking water bottles, and then, or I figure that, I'm being a hypocrite, for drinking out of a plastic water bottle. So I appreciate, you at least validating the fact that, just kind of being kind of new and kind of forever learning about sustainability. The more and more I kind of go through it, the more and more I learn and become more passionate about it. And I would imagine that is the same for a lot of different people. At Vistatec, I'm fortunate enough to work with some of the most iconic and innovative brands out there, and various industry verticals, their challenges, the ins and outs of successful multinationals. Plus, we've been able to be a part of the pulse that is driving business in the great reset that all of us are going through during this pandemic. It's from this that I've realized through my consumerism, somewhat embarrassingly, that the products that I buy can be sourced in more responsible ways. But what has really blown my mind actually is the business models and the products themselves, and how people are using sustainability, or companies are using sustainability to have better business practices and to be more innovative. So, I have up as a visual, there's, one of my favorite brands is a company called Greats, a shoe brand out of Brooklyn. And more, I actually bought a pair of their shoes before they were really kind of pushing the sustainability models of their shoes. But you can see here, there's some great messaging, and they talk specifically about the 100% vegan, and then how they're kind of producing the leather and the dye, and where the shoelaces are from, and a lot of these shoes also, with the plastics, maybe they're recycled plastics or whatever the case is. But I think that, there's the higher quality products that are coming from brands like Adidas and Nordstrom. I know is doing a big push on recycling bras through upcycling, and, Canada Goose now using reclaimed fur and focus on carbon neutrality and that kind of thing. And then there's companies that are not necessarily the retail companies that I'm describing, but, some of them fall that category, like IKEA. They're a big investment in sustainable energy. Akamai, DocuSign, Estee Lauder, OpenTable, all of them are quite a bit pushing these types of things. And yeah, they seem to approach sustainability from a very different angle. And I'm curious on like what makes those differences, or how are they coming, I guess, to determine what angle they're going to take or approach with sustainability.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. That's a great question. So it's there are different relevant approaches to sustainability. I'd say it really depends on what your industry is. Are you a shoe manufacturer, like you showed on screen? Are you IKEA and manufacturing furniture? I don't know the details of all the strategies you mentioned from Estee Lauder, etc. But for example, Accenture as a consulting firm, we don't manufacture, we produce immaterial services. So we'll have a very different environmental impact than companies who, as we mentioned, produce shoes. So it's really important. A cliche in consulting, there's no one size fits all approach, but it's true again here, because for a shoe, you're going to look at which materials are necessary, where they come from, are they traveling all the way to China? Is there a way to source them more locally and still at a price that makes sense, for your customer base? These kind of questions. If you're IKEA and you have a global footprint, by footprint I mean that there are IKEAs everywhere in the world. So they'll again have different approaches. I think it's going to be a mix of where we source the best woods, and in the same time where we can dispose of it locally without sending it somewhere else, etc. At Accenture, for example, so de facto with COVID last year, we didn't travel too much. But as we make our commitments going forward, we're really going to have to see how do we reduce travel, because it's what we do all the time. We travel to client sites back and forth.
Sure. Yeah. No. And I think it's with all the lack of traveling, I guess, over the past year plus, it's had quite an effect, on the environment, from what I've kind of read and seen. I've also been really appreciating some of the messaging that I am seeing from some of these companies. Like, there's some messaging from Madewell, and where they actually really break it down quite a bit. And then also just like, even Etsy, I like the honesty kind of in their messaging here, where they're just kind of, saying, we know we can do better. We all do this, to do better, we have to commit to sustainability and protecting our resources, et cetera. Yeah, I think is it more of a corporate culture kind of angle that you're usually taking? Like, is it something that in that particular way, I guess, with the messaging?
So
Or think they're coming about, like, some of that? I mean, obviously different industries, they're going to have different messaging, like you said, with products versus, when they're a tech company, it's going to be quite different. So is that something that is that something that you kind of go through with those organizations then?
yeah. But I wanted to react on something you mentioned earlier. Like in the past, I think there was really a fear of companies to disclose when they were doing something bad, and they would just, put it under the rug a bit and not mention it. Now
Yeah.
there's really an understanding that, okay, activities do have an impact, but what can we do about it? And so there's really more disclosure, more transparency. And of course, the audience is a bit frazzled at the beginning, but I think it's really like the journey they're taking their customer on with them, because it really shows like we know we're doing some things and we know we can improve, so we are improving, and let's do this together.
No, that's that's great. And like you said, it seems like they're not sweeping it under the rug, and that it's a little bit of trial and error along the way. So in September 2015, the General Assembly adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and that includes 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, building on the principle of leaving no one behind. The new agenda emphasizes a holistic approach to achieving sustainability development for all. So, for those who are able to view the image here, it's got the basically the sustainability development goals, or sustainable development goals put out by the UN. Are these SDGs used as the main guidance to bring awareness to multinational organizations? And what do you and your teams at Accenture specifically take them through when it comes to these kind of 17 areas?
So they're definitely one of the tools that are used out there. And you see, like, it comes from the United Nations, but for once it's very appealing. It's got colors, it's understandable. I think everyone understands what it means when you say that we need to care for our health for the future. We need to stop to reduce hunger, reduce poverty, stop hunger worldwide, etc. I think they really made an effort of, bringing it down to very relatable problems that we can all understand. And what I like about these is that, again, for companies, so they're one of the tools we use because it connects your basic, the iPhone, the cell phone that you produce, to their global changes, to the global challenges we're facing, and also to the global impacts they have. So we really use this in a way that we're going to look, and guides are available online, and it's available for everyone to use. If you're a company today and you want to look into that, there's really like a detailed methodology that you can read through and understand how it relates to you. And so for a company, what we would do is look at their business value chain, see if you're a company that produces chocolates, for example. We mentioned this on our previous calls.
Yeah.
And I'm a big chocolate fanatic, so I always like chocolate.
Yep.
So you're going to look more at where you source your chocolate from and how it impacts the locations where you source the chocolate from. So it may be if it comes from Africa, you're going to look there. How is it impacting positively or negatively these communities? And then you trace, all the way from your manufacturing process to the packaging, and to consumption. So, like chocolate. And are we making people fat? Are we making them diabetic, etc.? So
Yeah.
you can start looking at your value chain and looking initially, how are you impacting the sustainable development goal related to hunger in the world, and the one on health. which would be key for products such as a chocolate. We mentioned the cell phone. A cell phone will have a different value chain, but also you can connect it back to these sustainable development goals. And when we talk to companies through this, we suggest them to focus on the most relevant for them, and then maybe adding some as they mature.
No, and I like that it still goes through that kind of baby steps. I think that's really important, but I also like how, and I don't know if this really falls under kind of the circular economy thing, but just how the companies are starting to think about like where's their product going to be 10 years from now, right? Is it going to be in a landfill? Is it going to be, reused as part of another product? And they're actually thinking ahead, to do something like I guess it's kind of like upcycling, where they're specifically, it's almost like I almost think of it almost like re-engineering or backwards engineering or something along those lines to be more responsible with their resources. So I think that's really good. And then you mentioned something else about the mental health, and I think that's super important. Even Vistatec actually is having a mental health day this Friday, where we're kind of taking employees through different types of master classes to learn specifically how to kind of approach some of the pressures of from working from home and just all of those different things. So I think so much of this is intertwined and interconnected, and I really love a lot of that. What positive or negative changes have you seen during the pandemic that have changed the landscape within you at the companies that you work with, or just those companies? It could be anything, but just kind of like what has kind of changed or more so during this pandemic.
Well, you just mentioned it, mental health. Like you really hit it right on the spot, because it's I think I would say in general, more mindfulness, in terms of how you interact with others, etc. But you said like mental health. I have been positively shocked by how it's been brought up. Like, so at Accenture we have a mental health allies network. So we wear different badges, so people can come to us and talk to us if they feel bad, or if they feel that they're having a difficult moment. But it's always been, a bit, I don't know, I wouldn't say like it's been noted, but more and more during the pandemic, we've had, activities specialized, aimed at everyone for, mental health. Not even call that's just how are you feeling? Are you switching off? I had, managers calling me just to talk, things that you wouldn't even do before, especially in, consultancy companies where you're more like, you tend to be driven towards results, etc. So I do find that now you talk about these things more openly, and it's been good. I think there's also been, as a woman, there's been a discovery, of the amount of tasks that are involved around the home and doing this. So it's also brought out all of that, this unpaid work that the primary carers do. And I really like that. I find that the businesses are being more mindful around that.
Yeah, especially with a lot of people not used to working from home, and and then their home life balance, with working at home, and things can kind of blur together. I know that during the week sometimes it feels like one giant day. so so yeah, I completely hear where you're coming from. So I want to take a little bit of a trip down memory lane with you a little bit, and and as I
Don't
kind
go
of
too
mentioned to
far.
you. Yeah, no, I'll try not to. I'll try not to. But I just, when you and I first met, we talked quite easily, and and I did. I like to do my research, and you have such a crazy background, meaning just very extensive, very the degrees that you have are quite intimidating, and I just love that it's kind of your story's kind of become a story of purpose from my perspective. And you grew up in France, correct? And then you also went to several universities there. and I'll probably, as I told you, botch some of these names, but like the University de Poitiers,
I'll let you
and then
struggle. I'm not helping you.
I know. Then you'll just watch that, right? So I won't go through and use my bad French accent any further. I'll let you kind of say some of those universities, but you have a master's degree, you have a PhD in philosophy. You've lived in Portugal. You now live in the UK, and then you've also you were an emissions analyst working for the airlines at one point, I believe, and then you really kind of had to learn the ins and outs of diesel emissions, and that kind of thing. And then you went to the university before. It was kind of cool to teach sustainability management and eco design and life cycle assessment. And then you've been involved in so many different kinds of projects, like urban projects. Can you kind of take us a little bit more through some of that, and then leading up to where you are today? You're married, living in the UK, and have a young daughter as well.
Yeah, wow, that's a mouthful. That's a lot of stuff to say. Can we say that it's your mother who is French Canadian, no? So you should be speaking French. Yeah,
Quebecois.
So that's
No,
unacceptable.
she. Now, in my defense, she fled when the English and the French were having their difficulties back in the day, and they moved to Toronto. So,
All right.
so yes, she did take French, but she was not very good. Neither am I. So
Sorry.
go figure. Yes. No. I appreciate the call out.
But yeah, thank you for mentioning all that. You remember in my pop song I mentioned started from the bottom, now we're here.
Yep.
I realized, but it's in France you have a very elitist, like, okay, schools are free, so it's or very cheap, like much cheaper than the US. So it's easier for people to go to university, etc. So maybe that's also why I did all these studies, because I could. So that's a privilege I need to acknowledge, that I have this had this amazing educational system I could benefit from. Then, so in French, I mentioned there's a lot of elitism in engineering schools. You have to come out of the top 3, top 5 engineering schools, etc. If you're not an engineer, it's really hard for you to have a job or to have a scientific role. And I came from a background from universities, and I wanted to work in sustainability. And in the 90s, early 2000s, sustainability was all about the environment, and it was really like heavily engineering led. And I didn't have the right diploma, so I had to find my way through the back doors to get a master's in an engineering school, so that it would sound like I had the
yeah.
And then I managed to do a PhD, but working as a sustainability consultant, and really had to do both in the same time. So yeah, I like that you mentioned that it was really like purpose driven, because it may seem like I've done a lot of things, but the ultimate goal was always sustainability. And I have the impression that I did have to wait a lot before I could, be acknowledged as someone worth listening to in the field of sustainability, without being, having a huge scientific background, which I think might have been initially one of there was a high entry point for sustainability. Well, and it didn't make it accessible for everyone. Now I have the feeling it's coming mainstream again.
Do you think too, was it even more challenging, would you say, being a woman in science and as an engineer? And
so I'm not an engineer, so I don't know if
that engineering kind of mindset, I guess, or the science kind of mindset.
But is it because you don't have the right diploma, or you're a woman? I wouldn't know. Like, usually they don't tell you.
Yeah. I know that you went through quite a lot, and had so many different cool experiences, it sounds, over the years. And then, as I said, you've kind of come full circle. And then now, with the daughter, how has having a daughter now, a child, impacted your purpose as it relates to what you do every day?
Yeah, it's true. So I was never one of these persons, it's like I'm gonna be a mother, I'm gonna have a family, etc. But it happened, and happily so. So it's really like 2 years ago I had a daughter, and it made me realize things that I had no idea before. I'm sure all parents will relate. It's like what am I doing from 9 to 5, and sometimes from 6 to 8 p.m. Like why, like this time that I spend away from my child is actually, it should be meaningful. Let's make it worthwhile, right? And I think I had a bit. So I was doing project management and business outsourcing, and I think that's when I was like thinking, if I'm not with my daughter, like let's at least go back to something I really love, and sustainability, and that I find, like meaningful, and at least maybe it's a way of
And you're also
convincing.
you're helping to change the world, and I think that is the,
Hopefully.
just to kind of be blunt with it. But yeah, no, I mean, and I think too that must drive you, especially knowing that you have a daughter that will be in this world, doing what's going to be best for the future, for her and for future generations. So, I think that's really great. Can you take us through an actual story or two just to provide some context to what you and your team go through when consulting global organizations on social responsibility and on ESG, environmental and society and governance, or social and governance? Further, our audience may also find it helpful if you have any cautionary tales.
I don't think I have any cautionary tales at the moment. Not anything too juicy. Let's see if I can find something. So my team, we're part of the internal Accenture team, where we work on making our supply chain more sustainable. But recently, and actually in the past year, we've had such a demand from our clients around sustainability questions and sustainability in the supply chain, and supplier diversity too, that we became a bit, consultants, like an extension of the consultants team, trying to help our clients meet their goals. And so what would happen? We're more focused on supply chain. Our clients will, try to usually they don't really know exactly what they want. Like they have an idea. Everyone's doing net zero. When can we do it? Everyone's doing science-based targets. What does it mean? Or, how can I be more sustainable, etc. And so what we'll try to do is try to map it to, what their core activities are. Are there, a healthcare, in the healthcare industry? Are they a car manufacturer? Are they in the hospitality? And based on that, we'll try to see what makes sense for their business and what makes sense for their stakeholders as well. Because you need to be aligned with what your employees think is important to, as part of the whole picture. And so based on that, so we mentioned the SDGs before. We can use these as a bit of an initial framework to guide them. And then based on that will be the typical consultant role where, we set targets, and change, make sure that we update your infrastructure so you can reach these targets.
No, and when they're going through kind of like supply chain, you're taking them through supply chain management, to find more kind of responsible resources. Like, are you getting into that with them in terms of how they go about doing that, or how they're able to?
Yeah, to go really to the details and like what are the blockers at this point in time? Because if it was so easy, everyone would be doing it, right? So there is a reason why people are not doing it, and it's like, is it training and awareness? Is it that you don't find the right suppliers? Is it that your processes get in the way, or it's all this kind of thing. So we need to have a look at that really in detail and understand as well, like what's acceptable for you. You're not, maybe if you have never done anything for the past 50 years, it's not going to happen overnight. So, how can we take these baby steps together, and how can we, make sure that your company is equipped to lead the steps by themselves?
Yeah, no, and I kind of gather that it's similar to, in our own business, multilingual kind of content development, where that is always kind of continuous. It's always evolving. Is this also always something that's continuous and evolving, and something that, as an organization, they're just like, okay, you kind of prepare them for the fact that, hey, this is, kind of step one, and this is like a long-term goal, and it doesn't happen overnight. I know everybody wants it to happen, yesterday, right? So that they can have the data and they can have those things to kind of propel their company forward. But would you say it's continuous, and is there things constantly changing like anything else?
Yeah, it is continuous. It needs to be consistent and continuous over time. Like I know in our chats, you mentioned once, like, does it change with time? It shouldn't. What should become, like, it should only become bigger. I mean, like, and your scope should become broader, but it should not change. You can't really, like, one day, reduce your carbon footprint on a certain play, and then decide that you want to save orangutans in Indonesia. Like, it really needs to be consistent, because everyone is watching. That's the key thing now. I find it's like people are starting to pay attention, and they don't like stories that don't make sense.
Right. And it's real versus, just putting something up there for the sake of putting it up there. So yeah, no, that makes total sense. Just having to do with LCA, or life cycle assessment model, which tries to answer the question about environmental impact on an object has on the world from beginning to end, as we've kind of discussed a little bit. Is it and then this is, I guess, a factual analysis of a product's entire life cycle in terms of sustainability and carbon footprints and their capacity to trigger innovative actions within a company. You had an early focus analyzing the uses of environment assessment tools such as this one. Where does that, is that just kind of something that you learned early? Is this something you're just kind of passionate about on the side? How is this has this kind of bled into the other things that you're doing now at Accenture as well?
So, in one of my previous roles in my PhD was focused on life cycle assessments, which is, looking at a product and the service this product renders throughout its whole life cycle. So we have a phone on this picture. It's like, for me to be able to phone for one day, to use my phone for one day, what are the, like, environmental impacts related to it? And we look at different environmental impacts, not just a carbon footprint. So I used to do that a lot in a previous role, because it was in France and probably related to this more engineering approach that I mentioned. But it's really it's a key tool for companies that are manufacturers, so they can see, what should I focus on when I'm when I'm manufacturing my products? What is the key impact I need to tackle? Is it, do I dump a lot of wastewater? Do I damage biodiversity? Or do I need to focus on energy consumption, etc.? So these are key environmental damages that can come out of this type of assessments. And it's really important if you're a manufacturer. As a professional now, I don't do these life cycle assessments. I do understand the high level, like, and it helps me approaching different projects. For example, I always look at things from a life cycle perspective. And if I talk to a client that is, we mentioned, a car manufacturer, I will know
Sure.
where to focus versus if it's a client who will produce a lot of waste. So it always, like, it gives me a good framework to understand where we're going to have to focus from a strategic perspective.
No, I think that makes complete sense. And is it more now where there's these? It seems like they're kind of focused on certain kind of departments and kind of getting them up to speed. Is it certain departments that you're working with most of the time, or is it just? I know you talked about procurement and supply chain, so obviously sourcing. So is there any? I mean, like, are you dealing with kind of the executive level, strategic folks as well, and then also dealing with like the product development folks as well?
So again, I don't do life cycle assessments at the moment, but life cycle
Right.
assessments will have an impact on the design of your product, on the supply chain, because if you decide to change one of your materials, you'll have to find a new way to source it. So yeah, your supply chain will be impacted. Your procurement team will have to find someone who's able to source it and meet the criteria you need. In terms of design, you'll have to make sure that your specs in terms of durable, how durable they are, like will they last long, quality, etc.
Yeah.
And at exec level, and in terms of strategy, is this will have an impact on, if you're a shoemaker, it will have an impact on your whole range of shoes, not just the one. Unless you do one shoe that is sustainable, so then
Yeah.
that's when you need to bring in the exec level to say, okay, what are we doing with this? What is our approach? What is acceptable? What's not? And if we want to do this, this is what we have to do. Do you guys support it or not? And it will have to come then from the exec level to have the support.
No, that's great, John. Thank you. So moving to the next image, I'll just kind of read this quote. It's, just to kind of put things a little bit in perspective, and it actually comes from an essential strategy on sustainability, something called the Green Behind the Cloud. It's a public report. Migrations to the public cloud can reduce CO2 emissions by 59 million tons per year, which equates to taking 22 million cars off the road. To me, that's just kind of a staggering thing. And 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 I know we're here actually. Actually, the quote is on the next image. So, but in this particular case, and we've kind of covered sustainability reporting a little bit and supply chain management. But I did have kind of a question about reporting in general. So I recently read that some are saying that sustainability reports are need to be kind of done in a different way because they're really not resonating well enough with the different kind of stakeholders within the organization to really understand, or how to kind of apply the data or what they're learning from the data. Are you finding that there's anything odd or anything that could be changed with regards to sustainability reporting? And do you have any thoughts on that at all?
On reporting, I think so. There are a lot of international standards that company can refer to, like the GRI, which is Global Reporting Initiative. The Sustainable Development Goals also provides a bit of guidance on how to report on them, etc. So companies are learning how to make their reports, and more they are driven towards these international standards, which allows for transparency and a bit of a framework that is recognizable from one report to the other. But then I think that a report is just that. Like it's just a report. It's got
Yeah.
data. That's what the standards and metrics focus on. It's like, how do we make sure that for this particular impact we have a criteria that makes sense, and how do we make sure that the company reporting is using the right methodology to collect this data. That's what a report is. Unfortunately, it's not for an audience, unless there's been a lot of storytelling involved behind. It won't tell much. What I've seen more and more companies do is that they have a more, audience-friendly report, and then the one with the data attached to it. you need to look at a report thinking of what you want to find in it. It's like a report will be a good exercise for a company because they need to take a good look at themselves and be like, okay, what are my impacts? How do I list them? What's my methodology, etc. And by disclosing, by just starting and disclosing what their impacts are, they're able to track process in time and see how they progress. And I think that's the key thing. Whether, a report is just a tool. You don't blame a hammer because it's not building a furniture. You need to action the hammer. So benchmarking between the companies is interesting from a market perspective. Clients always ask us, like, how am I doing against my peers, etc. But the first thing that is important, and for me, what is key in a report. So I used to read company one versus company two and try to compare. And now what I do is I read the same company, but year on year, and I try to see where they've made progresses, where they're not making any progresses, how they justify that, what's happened, etc. So I think that's what we need to find. That's what really is key in reports.
With the kind of great reset, does it give? There's this kind of it's kind of giving companies an opportunity to kind of reinvent their supply chain management a bit for sure. So I think that's something that's really interesting with this kind of going on. As we discussed at the beginning, there's a variety of ways in which an organization has sustainability ambitions and numerous ways to deliver content messaging consistent with the company's brand and goals. Do you have any guidance on how or what the do's and don'ts are when it comes to messaging content specifically about sustainability and better ways, or I guess, to kind of globalize that content or globalize sustainability in that sense?
So by default, from my role, I need to think from a globalized point of view. Of course, and climate change and like these are global issues. So we tend to write globalized messages. I think what is important is start with an assessment and make it meaningful. Like, it needs to be material. By material, I mean, it needs to be aligned with your actual impacts are. Again, if we, if you're an insurance company and you work on, putting more, like reducing your palm oil consumption, it doesn't have sense. So really make it impactful, meaningful, and align with your core business. And think of it from a wider perspective. Who are your stakeholders in insurance? So in insurance, for example, what would be important, depending on the country, is like, do I need to make my products more accessible for certain types of populations at risk, etc.? These are all questions that need to be brought up by sustainability. So have an assessment first. Decide what's important for you, for your business, for your stakeholders, and then set up targets. And today is a better day to start than tomorrow, and just take it step by step. In terms of communication, don't oversell it. Don't I would say that just tell the story as it is. No need to say that we're reinventing our product if we're just learning how to switch lights off in the office, this kind of thing. So just I think people will respond more to that.
As a polyglot, like somebody who speaks multiple languages, you had to kind of communicate some of these concepts back at the past in multiple languages. Did you find that there's a difference in kind of doing this from a cultural perspective? I mean, I imagine every country's got a little bit different of a way that they're kind of embracing sustainability.
Yeah, no, you're right. So at individual level, so not as a professional, I think being in a global company, you tend to have the global view, but when you go out in restaurants and have the more casual conversation, etc., when we will be able to go out, I should say, you realize that awareness is not the same depending on the country. And like in France, but it also depends from where you come from. In France, for example, it was you wouldn't have tomatoes or strawberries in winter, and that's an accepted fact. I moved to the UK, and people, they consider it normal to have tomatoes, and I'm like, where do you even grow your tomatoes? You don't have a seed for it, right?
Yeah.
And
I never thought of that actually, but that's a really
that's
good
the
point.
thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's normal. Maybe it's because I come from the countryside. So, but sometimes it's normal, and sometimes people look at you like, "Why are you such a buzzkill, Jeanne?" So yeah, it really depends. In Brazil, for example, yeah, I thought that naively, they were a bit backwards on what was plastic use, and everything comes in a plastic bag, and I looked like a total hipster, with my tote bag. But in the same time, they have way more awareness about their environment and the biodiversity. And me coming now living in a city, I don't have that so much anymore. So yeah, it really depends. So I always try not to. I don't come with lessons. I get the conversation going, and that's it.
Do you when it comes to sustainability culture and the impact it has on global business, do you have any kind of recommendations for those trying to evangelize or commercialize sustainability within their own organization? And, and also as individuals, sometimes everybody's kind of trying to rally the companies to do things, but there's a lot we can do as individuals as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I don't like to be picky, but to use the word evangelize, and for me, that makes it sound as you're preaching for a belief. It's thing to believe or not. It's there, It's actions surely have consequences on the planet, whether it's on biodiversity, whether it's on human health, or climate change. So um, it's so I wouldn't use evangelize. It's just, have a conversation with people, tell them about what you know. I think we need to, we've become a bit disconnected from, what's happening behind the scenes. What happens when what is the impact behind, having tomatoes in the middle of winter? What is the impact behind buying an iPhone every 6 months? This kind of things. So, and I think laws are that are coming along are helping become like making these a bit clearer. So I think that's a good point. I think companies willing to move forward and making these commitments also is a good point. Like we have lots of commitments around net zero by 2030. Accenture signed all of this. I think it's bringing out the issues, and people are finally understanding what they need to do. So start with an assessment. That's what I would say.
What can people do themselves to be more sustainable and for the betterment of the world around them? Is there certain advice that you have, or certain kinds of, for example, I've seen that old emails to remove some of the carbon footprints, from emails and whatnot, that each email or each type of email has a certain level of emissions that it puts out there, so that doing simple things like deleting your old emails is one way to kind of contribute. Are there other things along those lines that kind of come to mind that are kind of easy enough for folks out there to kind of do?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. So we didn't get to talk about the green cloud and things like that because but you mentioned emails. A lot of our hidden impacts are just sitting on the couch watching Netflix and watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine for the 10th time. Like if you watch this in HDMI, it will make a data center roll somewhere. So I think it's just be mindful of what you're doing, question a bit what you're doing. And as a general view, it's, we say reduce, reuse, recycle. That's very good. The first thing you can do, and that's the best one, is refuse. Like, do I need a 10th pair of shoes if we're going to be in lockdown for another 6 months?
Yeah.
Do I need, can my TV last for another year, and this kind of thing? So the first thing we can do as individuals is refuse. If someone is handing me stuff and I don't need it, just say no. I think that's,
No,
aim at more frugality.
no. And did you want to say something specifically about the green cloud? Because I think that's a kind of an interesting kind of subject as well.
So yeah, as we move to a more digital culture, we don't see these emissions happening in the background, and a lot of what we do today, like even we've all moved remotely, so everything is powered by data centers. So we're not traveling, but we do use more data centers when we're on Teams, when we're on Zoom, etc. And so on this, so Accenture's published a report that you mentioned, so towards the green clouds. And it really shows that if you move to a dedicated infrastructure, you can reduce your emissions, because a data center provider will use your infrastructure with several clients. It will be optimized. And if you move to a provider that uses green energy, then it also reduces the impact on that. But that was more.
And I think that kind of also kind of aligns a little bit, or runs a little bit in parallel with digital transformation going on and this kind of digital first world that we're living in, and some of the benefits that have come from that. I mean, I think too, like you were mentioning some of the things you kind of do without, but I think of, do I need to drive anywhere? Not really, right? There's really nowhere to go. So I'm not driving much. As an individual, and I'm walking a lot, so that's pretty good there. So I think things like that make a lot of sense. And just something that kind of comes to mind that I kind of wanted to quickly say was, there's this app out there called Nextdoor that some people might have heard of, and I actually, just little things that I try to do myself to kind of take these things and turn them into action is, I actually messaged Nextdoor, the app, and I just said, hey, you guys have this amazing network for neighborhoods, kind of communicating. And then but what about monetizing recycling, and for people, especially I'm thinking like children, and when people were bored during the pandemic, I know everybody was scared to touch things for a long time, but it was always going through my mind walking my dog every day, is I was like, man, I would see garbage, I'd be like feeling a little bit like a scavenger or some kind of weirdo because I'm picking up garbage with the plastic bags, and from my dog. So yeah, which is probably not the best thing to use, but I had to use something. But you get my point. So I did reach out to them, and I'm hoping that they will respond back to me, just to kind of see if they could bring that to light, because I thought, wow, if each kind of community could throw some money in a pot, right, it might encourage people to go out there and actually kind of do stuff for their community. So just kind of food for thought. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that idea.
No, it's great. And I think, since we've all stayed at home for a while, it really encouraged us to really like take care of your home, take care of your garden, and of your neighbors and community.
No, and I love that, with community being of the utmost importance. So yeah, no, I really appreciate everything today, Jeanne. I know that it's been a little bit compact today. Did you have any kind of last minute kind of statements or anything else that you wanted to kind of say before we kind of wrapped up a little bit here?
No, I think thank you for having me. It was a great experience. And it was my first.
I definitely think we could have part 2.
I hope it was okay, and I hope you all enjoyed.
No, you've been great. Thank you so much, Jeanne, for being here today. And once again, please feel free to post your questions on the LinkedIn events page, but we'll also be collecting the ones that were kind of coming through Zoom as well, and we'll relay those to Jeanne. And a million thanks to those listening. Till next time, be the seed that grows silently. Stay open, and cheers all. I am your host, Michael Asquith at Vistatec, and signing off. Thank you so much, everyone. Cheers.
Thank
Bye,
you, everyone.
Jeanne.
Bye.
Oh, yeah. Yo, let's do this. Now, place your homie rolling.